Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone, episode 42. This one is called Demystifying Metaphysics. Here with Brad. How are you, Brad?
Ooh, mysterious. I am, as always, never better. And yourself.
Never better, Brad.
Awesome.
Never surpassed this moment.
Life just keeps improving, doesn't it?
hmm so we got a pretty juicy one here. Metaphysics, commonly known as a field of study. Got a pretty good bumper script to kick things off. Ready to hear it?
Let her rip.
All right, here we go. What is metaphysics? According to the establishment, it's a field of study. It's a branch of philosophy. It's a description of such concepts as being, existence, time, space, causality, and so on. However, no one seems to pause and look directly at the word metaphysics, from Greek, metaphysical, beyond physical. And therefore, should the discussion not begin with the identification of those specific things which are beyond physical? Thoughts, emotions, imagination, dreams, are these things not beyond physical? Sure, the materialist brainwashing establishment tells you that these are eventually to be explained by physical sciences. But for you right now, are these not the real metaphysics? Today, we demystify metaphysics and discuss those things which are truly beyond physical.
Excellent.
How you like that one, Brad?
That was beautiful. And I'm looking forward to this because you and I have both said this word several dozen times in previous podcasts. And, my feeling is that the word doesn't have a lot of meaning for most people. So it's just kind of this, I don't even know what to say. This kind of mystical word that they're not quite sure what it's about, and it just doesn't have any value. So hopefully, by the time we're done with this, everybody will be clear on how we're using the term and what I say that the real meaning of it is. We'll see if we get there. Want to give it a shot?
Well, I can just comment that it surely is a freaky deaky word. Uh, to most people, it's kind of like that weird branch of philosophy where they talk about stuff that you don't understand and use really complex words and describe things in a way that you're just like, what are these people talking about?
Right. Only really smart guys that could write tens of thousands of word articles deal with metaphysics. It's not for the average Joe. That's
Sometimes
the
I feel
attitude.
like the people who claim to, have a marvelous understanding of Hegel and Kant, uh, when you press them a bit, kind of don't have any idea what they're talking about.
Lost in abstractions, for sure.
So we figured we'd start by going over the establishment definitions, just to see like what's the establishment, description of what's metaphysics, right? So
Yes.
we got Google, Wikipedia, ChatGPT. I'm just gonna breeze through these, so I'll give you a chance to just comment each time, Brad. So Google, the Oxford definition, the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, identity, time, and space.
Yeah, I mean, in each of these definitions, there's a whiff of accuracy, right? So in
Right.
this particular, they say first principles of things, right? First principles. I agree with that part of the definition. Um, but then it does become a thing about abstract concepts,
Yeah.
right? According to the establishment, let's talk and write and argue and debate about abstract concepts ad infinitum. So that's what their thought process is.
Right. And as we
Following
go
this,
through each of these things, you're going to start to get an idea of what we're getting at here, deeper and deeper.
mhm.
So Wikipedia, metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that examines the basic structure of reality. It is often characterized as first philosophy, implying that it is more fundamental than other forms of philosophical inquiry. Metaphysics is traditionally seen as the study of mind independent features of the world, but some modern theorists understand it as an inquiry into the conceptual schemes that underlie human thought and experience.
Yeah, I mean, so they get a little bit right there in the first sentence, second sentence about first philosophy, and then they, break off mind. I don't, there are no mind independent features according to real metaphysicians. So that's a made up thing. What's independent of the mind?
Well, I thought the funny part was to say it's understood as an inquiry into conceptual schemes. Well,
Yeah, what does that
imagine
mean?
that.
Yeah,
What's that?
what is it? What
Well,
is a
we're doing an inquiry into conceptual schemes.
right that underlie human thought?
Yeah, that
Yeah, I mean,
underlie it. Well, what are they? The concept. What are the? Why would you do an inquiry into concepts? Like, why would you inquire into concepts? That's not
yeah.
science. That's not.
Well,
That's not inquiry. You don't inquire into concepts. You inquire into the concretes to which the concepts refer.
yeah, and if you were looking at first philosophy as they try to pretend they're going to do in the beginning, why don't they look at the nature of thought? That would be the
Mhm.
first philosophy, right? That would be the what underlies things is thought. Let's start there and see what we can explain. And of course, the answer is nothing. They don't ever talk about thoughts.
Okay. I'll just list one more here. Metaphysics, ChatGPT 4.0. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy concerned with explaining the fundamental nature of reality and existence. It seeks to answer questions about what things exist, what their essential properties are, how they are related to each other, and how they can be classified.
Hmm. Yeah, more abstract thinking, right? Let's put everything into groups. Let's separate everything. Uh, answer questions
A lot
about
of beating
what
around the bush,
things.
right?
Yeah,
Like
this
it's
is the
all
worst.
about like just intellectual stuff like rational academic descriptions of concepts. But like so yeah, but what? But what thing are you talking about? Right?
Yeah, just air. It's all abstraction and and conceptual, right? But they're using those words in their definitions as well, right? Let's just build more thought-based concepts and talk about them and argue about them. That's really what they're
Okay.
saying.
So we'll go through some of the philosophers now. We're going to go through Aristotle, Immanuel Kant, or Kant. I'm not actually sure. I never remember. I check what that is, whether it's Kant or Kant, and I always forget. Plato, Rene Descartes, and Hegel. Ready to go?
Let her rip.
Okay, Aristotle. Aristotle's metaphysics centers on the concept of substance. I mean, just from the get-go, I'm like, why does it center on the concept? Why doesn't it center on something beyond physical? Why doesn't it say it centers on substance? It says it centers on the concept of substance, which he sees as the primary form of being. He introduces the idea of actuality and potentiality, where actuality is the fulfillment of potential. I mean, like the abstraction in that sentence alone, the actuality and potential, where the actuality is the fulfillment of the potential. You're lost.
Yeah.
Aristotle's famous four cases, material, formal, efficient, and final, explain why things exist and change. His work emphasizes that everything in nature has a purpose or end, tell us, and understanding this purpose is key to understanding its nature.
Hmm. Yeah, this is a bit, by the way, it's four causes, not four cases you mentioned there earlier. But yeah, material,
Oh, sorry,
formal,
just read
efficient,
that
and
wrong. I
final.
do know it's four causes. I just made a little boo-boo there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really I think, a poor representation of Aristotle, this particular paragraph. But yeah, I mean, we're dealing again, we're dealing with just abstractions and things, it's all substance and material based according to this definition, and really bears no resemblance to true metaphysics.
Well, I don't see any actual thing that you can grasp onto there. Like
Right? That's
there's
the
no thing in reality, no existent there.
right. I think the point of that brief summary was to stop you, just turn your brain off and have zero interest in studying Aristotle's metaphysics.
Yeah. And I find that they put it this way and they say it like, it's big words, right? Smart people use big words.
Mhm.
So you might hear it and you might go, "Whoa, that I didn't understand that. So I must not be able to understand that. That must be for like people much smarter than me that they
Right.
can people who can understand when, the idea of actuality and potentiality, where actuality is the fulfillment of potential." Right.
Right. Yeah, that's the trick, and they used that quite successfully in the 1920s, right? That was with Einstein, that was the word that spread around the world was that Einstein's discoveries were so revolutionary and complex that only 12 people in the world could understand it. So you just automatically remove yourself from ever even trying to understand it
Hmm.
when you hear something like that, right?
Oh yeah. He must
So
have been
there's
this untouchable genius, that like you shouldn't even bother trying because you're just not as smart as him.
what if only 12 people could understand it? I mean, think about how many physics professors there were in 1925, right? It had to be several thousand around the world. Well, not, they
Hmm.
couldn't even understand it. Yeah, it just so happened that
Just couldn't
500,
understand it. Just full stop. They just look at it like I can't understand it. They're
500
just
of
not
them
smart enough to understand it, even though it's written right in front of them. They
wrote
can
a
go through
book.
the paper, they just can't understand it. That's what we're expected to believe.
Yeah, that's what, and to this day, that's what people when you talk about Einstein. Oh yeah, I don't. Who understands that? Who can really understand that? It's still going 100 years later. Anyway,
Okay, dokie.
off subject. What does
So
Kant have to say?
we'll go to Kant. Immanuel Kant's metaphysics is rooted in his critical philosophy, which asserts that human experience is shaped by the mind's structures. Kant argues that while we can never know the thing in itself, noumenon, we can understand phenomena, how things appear to us. His transcendental idealism posits that space and time are forms of human intuition, not properties of things in themselves, and that causality is a category of the mind used to organize experiences.
Yeah, that's closer to real metaphysics than anything we've heard yet. But
Mhm.
again, it's written in a way, and transcendental idealism. You've got to really dig deep, and you end up with more abstractions than really what I say the simple nature of metaphysics is. But
Well,
yeah,
the other issue with Kant is that he says that you can never know the thing in itself. It's like you can see the appearance and you can never know it. You can never know what it is.
I
So
agree with him.
don't you even try because you can't.
I I agree with that.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
Never.
never.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
I thought you had a bit in common with Kant.
yeah. No, I'm in harmony with some of the things he says for sure. But again, it doesn't take 5,000 articles or 20 books to describe metaphysics, as we'll soon find out.
Okay, Plato. Plato's metaphysics is characterized by his theory of forms, which posits that the material world is a shadow of a higher, unchanging reality. According to Plato, forms are perfect and eternal, archetypes of which objects in the physical world are imperfect copies. True knowledge for Plato is knowledge of these forms, which can only be grasped through reason and philosophical inquiry, rather than through sensory experience.
Yeah, and I don't think that's accurate. That and I underlined and italicized that just because I think that wherever you pulled that info from ChatGPT or whatever, I think it's been fudged. Uh, Plato wouldn't have said that. You grasp it through reason and philosophical inquiry. Only can be grasped that way. I think Plato said the exact opposite, but that work that Plato produced has been suppressed or hidden. That's my feeling. Um, but the establishment agrees with that paragraph. What do you think?
Mhm. Um, See, I think Kant and Plato have a lot in common. It's this
Yep.
intrinsicism that the objects have like a internal, unknowable realness that cannot be known. But you tend to agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. The forms, the substances in forms are all temporary. right? So you can argue the realness of something that's temporary. That's where it gets deep. Anyway, not important. Let's keep rolling.
All right, we got Descartes. Descartes' metaphysics starts with his famous dictum, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, establishing the thinking self as the foundation of his philosophy. Descartes posits a dualistic view of reality, dividing existence into two distinct substances, mind and body. He believes that the mind and body interact but are fundamentally different in nature, with the mind being non-material and the body material.
Yeah, I mean, a mix of this and that here. I mean, the Descartes was all about thinking, and
Mhm.
that is like that was the whole ball game, and really it's only a part of the ball game. And he doesn't get to the essence of metaphysics. He was all about the thinking aspect of things, which interestingly, this word mind has been fudged over time, right? It in older ancient times, the word mind really comprised heart, mind, and soul. I think I've mentioned that before. But as we come forward in time, 500 years back and to now, mind implies effectively brain, even though he's not using it in that way, right? He's suggesting that mind is non-material here, which is interesting, right? Most people today, when you say mind, they think of your brain, and everything in the mind is inside your skull. Yeah.
Mm, I don't know what they think. Do you reckon that's what they think? They think the
I th-
mind's
yeah.
like the brain?
Yeah, I think everything that encompasses the word mind is inside your skull. That's what I think most people think today. If you were to
Oh.
randomly poll 100 people, very
Yeah,
few
well,
would say,
I would suppose that they imagine that the brain is like the cause of thoughts, and the thoughts and how they're how that stuff functions as mind. That's what I would think that they think.
well, and according to establishment, it's some form of chemical process inside the skull. That's what a thought has to be. It can't be anything else. Right? What else could it
I've
be?
definitely heard a lot of people tell me that chemical imbalances and chemical changes cause things like your character and who you are in life.
Well, what's a thought? Right? That's the real question. What is a thought? What is it made out of? Where is it located? Right?
Hmm.
The materialists will tell you, well, these types of thoughts are in this part of the brain, and these types memories, short-term memories in this part of the brain, and long-term memories in this part of the brain. But they still can't point you to the thoughts. Where is it? Where are these things called thoughts? What are they made out of? Can you see them? Can you find them? The answer is no, 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 and no. So
Right. See,
I would
that's where a lot of this stuff leads you, like this metaphysics. It kind of like it starts to touch on things, right? And talking, like brings up concepts, right? But you never feel like you're getting to the actual stuff. It's always
right.
dancing around concepts and seeing how weirdly they can, like if you ever want to go read something by Sartre, like on being in nothingness, is the most word salad nonsense that you could ever try to read. And it's really just like just playing with the concepts and just spinning them into different forms. And it
Right.
never really gets to anything.
Arid puffery, as I like to call it. The yeah, and I'm just I'm just going on this path because I'm giving credit to Descartes there for suggesting that the mind is non-material. I think he was right about that. Um,
Okie dokie.
so, but
So we'll do Hegel.
otherwise, yeah, not impressed with Descartes. Go ahead.
Hegel's metaphysics revolves around his concept of the absolute, which he sees as the ultimate reality that unfolds through a dialectical process. Hegel's dialectic involves the development of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, leading to the realization of the absolute spirit. For Hegel, reality is a dynamic process where contradictions are resolved through synthesis, ultimately leading to a higher understanding and unity of all things.
Well, yeah. So Hegel's got. I like his talk of absolute spirit and unity of all things. It's interesting, but getting there via logic and his dialectic method is a a matter that doesn't point you in that direction, unfortunately. You'll
Right.
never,
Like if
you'll,
this is metaphysics, wouldn't and you wanted to talk about what Hegel's metaphysics are, wouldn't you just go straight for this thing called the absolute spirit? Like, why are we on about his dialectic and the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis? It's like, why don't we just talk about your spirit here? That seems like the real beyond physical thing here.
right. As long as you're dancing and playing with the concepts and abstractions, you're moving away from what he's suggesting, understanding the unity of all things. You can't
Right.
get there. You can't get to the
Yeah.
unity of all things by constantly talking about all the different things.
Right. So, I mean, what I get from that is like, it seems like, it always seemed to me that a lot of these philosophers were really, rationalists and really just like intellectual people that hadn't by any means experienced the unity of all things like Christ or Buddha. Um, and they're just talking about it and using a bunch of concepts without any actual, they don't have this higher understanding that Hegel talks about.
Right. And that's all that'll ever get you. The more you think about it, the further you get from it.
Right.
The more you write about it, the more you develop your own, philosophy, the further away you get from it. So say the real metaphysicians, of course, which we'll talk about.
Okay. So, we've elaborated on the, general response here to the establishment stuff here. But Brad, you want to put forward this thing, core response to establishment.
Yeah, so I've been saying it throughout, but yeah, it's a subject to be debated is what I'm talking about. It's a let's sit and talk about concepts and ideas,
Right. Yeah.
abstractions, and let's debate whether or not they're true or not. We'll never get to a final answer as long as we sit and talk about them all, right?
Mhm.
So there's all kinds of these philosophical lines of thinking, right? Idealism, rationalism, nihilism, all the isms, right? So this metaphysics has been turned into just another one of these isms that we'll endlessly debate. And that's what the establishment calls metaphysics, which couldn't be further from the truth, I might add.
I think I had it in here. They've obfuscated the word. They've obfuscated the stuff, right? Like you've got beyond physical. So you would, if you didn't immediately go, oh, metaphysics, well, I better go talk to someone smarter than me because I don't believe in my own intellectual abilities. So let me read a philosopher, right? If you didn't do that and you just looked at the word and you went metaphysical, and then you would say, well, what things are metaphysical? What things are beyond physical? And you just did it yourself, you'd probably get to something worth focusing on a lot faster than reading a bunch of isms by experientially confused philosophers, I think. Would you agree with that,
Right.
Brad?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of them were trying to find and point to. I'm not taking credit away from their efforts. They were trying to find an answer. Right? They knew that the explanation for their existence and beingness and reality wasn't that nothing satisfied them, so they were looking
Hmm.
elsewhere. But these aren't none of these people. Well, Plato, I think, was a metaphysician, but not that establishment right up on him. But the rest, were not metaphysicians, but they're just pseudo metaphysicians, if you will, promoted by the establishment
Right.
to
And the
keep.
pseudo part about it is that these are people who say words about stuff, right? Because I get the feeling that like people would be like, well, are you as good at metaphysics as these philosophers? Like, what's your background here? Like, do you have a degree?
Right.
It's like that's not where we're coming in to this argument, right? Like
Yeah, not even close.
their
Yeah,
thing is an intellectual debate. It's a field of study. That's the point we're making. Okay. And Brad's going to put forward now stuff that isn't an intellectual debate, but rather are pointing at things that are beyond physical, that are metaphysics.
exactly. Well said. So we're
Okay.
down here. Okay. So yeah.
So
So
you've got the what's most important to you spiel. Do you want to say that one, Brad?
spiel. You got to say the Yiddish right. Spiel. Yeah. So
Spiel.
I
Brad
do this
Spiel.
do this with a lot of people, and I ask people, what what's the most important thing in the world to you? And I get a bunch of wonderful answers. You know, my children, God, my family, my spouse, my, health, all wonderful answers, right? Who can argue with any of those things, right? But you can't have any of those things unless you have the things that in this list to begin with. And these would, so all those things are physical things. I mean, I guess God, you wouldn't say is physical, right? But everything else is something physical. But without the metaphysical things in your life, none of those things would make a difference. So I start with thoughts, right? If you didn't have any thoughts, you wouldn't have, this wouldn't be my child or my spouse or my career or my health, right? There just wouldn't be any identification with anything, right? So your thoughts are more important to you than your children because you don't have any children without thoughts. Yeah? You with me?
Oh, don't worry. It's easy Ayn Rand discussion. She's like, your life is the most highest value because without your life, you wouldn't have other values. So I'm on board with that.
Right? And more important than your thoughts really are your feelings. And Abraham Hicks says this all the time. They say nothing is more important to you than how you feel. And nobody needs a world-class establishment metaphysician to understand the impact of that, right? We've all been elated and saddened and depressed and grieving or overjoyed, right? And so we know when we're in those elation feelings, life is wonderful, right? Deeply in love, puppy love, that kind of thing. Life is great. And when things aren't going your way and you feel terrible, life sucks, right? You don't feel like doing anything. So it doesn't really matter
Hmm.
how much money you have or whether you have a loving family or whether you have a great job. If you don't feel good about whatever, then life is terrible for you. So you can see that, and furthermore, if we go to the idea of your children, your spouse, your family, right? If you didn't have any feelings for any of them, then they wouldn't be important to you, right? If
Right.
you didn't love your kids, love your spouse, right? They would just be other people running around with all the other people. There'd be no differentiation between them.
Right. You
You,
wouldn't have been able to bring your children into existence. You wouldn't have been able to raise your children. You wouldn't be able to have ever cared about your children or thought about your children or done anything. These are prerequisites to children.
right. And we'll point out that the the establishment can't tell us what thoughts and feelings are, right? They have
Right.
no, you can go read their nonsense about what they say. Thoughts are these chemical interactions in the brain, and we can turn off this brain center, and then the person's short-term memory goes away. I mean, that's their explanation, but they don't know what the substance of a thought is. They don't know where they come
Can,
from or where they go.
can I show you
And
what scientists do at this point to flip it back that they're still the cool guys? They say, well, that's the very wonder of science, you see, because we always admit that there's more to know, and science is always unfolding, and these are things that we will eventually,
right,
by science, come to know, and that's why science is the greatest, because we don't
uh,
know yet, but we endeavor to know. That was my
right.
Dawkins.
Nicely done. Yeah, so they're lost in downstream discussions, I call them, right? They're skipping over the most important things in your life to ramble on about other things. Of course, and my point here with this is that for thousands of years, metaphysicians or yogis or masters or swamis have been talking about thoughts and feelings and what they are, where they come from, where they reside. But this is all ignored by the establishment, right? The scientismists come around 1880, and for over the last 150 years, the materialists have just ignored what other cultures and spiritual and metaphysical uh, masters have been saying for thousands of years. We're just going to ignore all that, and we're going to say we don't know what thoughts and feelings really are, and it's the great mystery of science, right? So how does that wash with you?
Um, which part, like what's most important to you about it, or just on thoughts and feelings in general?
Well, I'm talking to Dawkins now, right? So what do you think about Yogi so and so? Yogananda, what he said about thoughts and feelings. What do you think about that?
You want me to play
Should
Dawkins?
Yeah, right. He was
Well,
talking
I
about
mean,
that in
this is
1910.
obviously widely discredited by science. There's no
Right.
proof of
That's
any
it.
of this. I don't think it even requires any attention, to be honest.
Yeah. Right. And they describe, of course, they describe what I'm going to get into here in a second, but this is just my point, right? Is they skip over, we all ignore these things that are most important to us. And
Mm,
nothing's more important than how you feel. But then we'll go one step further, and I'll say even your breath is even more important than all the rest, right? And then that is, without your breath, you can't live. So you can't have kids or spouses or health or money or anything without breath. So that's even more important. And of course, the word breath comes from Latin spiritus, right? To inspire spirit. And this is effectively the suggestion that we get our inspiration, we get our life, right? Everything that makes everything else work starts with the breath. And materialists will argue, well, that's a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen and carbon, but really, we don't have time to cover that tonight. But that too is not true. So I always tell people those three things, breath, feelings, thoughts, more important than all the other things you list. So that should hopefully make people stop and think for a second. All right.
it's kind
All I
of like
want,
if you have, you're building something, right? Like some whatever you're building. Doesn't really matter. But and you might say that's important to you, but if you don't have the tools to build it, well, you'll never build it. So these
yeah,
things are primary.
I'd say they're the
Like
foundation, right?
they're the foundation, and I suppose that that's fair to say that they're you could put it that that means that they're most important.
Right. And keep moving along here. We'll talk about imagination, right? Which is, some people just chalk that up to your thinking process, but it's more, it's visual, right? There are images in there,
Mm,
right? And several metaphysicians speak of almost nothing but our imagination and how that generates our reality. That alone, coupled with the feelings. And so there's another mystery to modern establishment science, right? What is this thing, imagination? They have to ignore it just like all the rest. And then that leads us right into dreams, right? And I think we talked about two different types of dreams, right? Kind of like, the daydream, like, oh, one day I want to be a rich zillionaire and popular and have 5 Ferraris and 10 mansions, blah, 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 right? That's one type of dream. But then ours are, nightly dreams when we sleep, which are also a mystery to establishment science.
mhm.
But in both cases, the dreams, couple those with imagination, and those types of things are life changing people, especially if you have a dream, right? One day I want to be the greatest doctor in the world or whatever, right? You have that dream when you're 10 years old. That dream carries you right through the tough times and the hard work and the long hours and so forth, the medical school, and gets you to that, when you hit age 26 or whatever, you reached your dream, your goal.
Mhm. Not that we are fans of our boy Newton, but even Newton's theory of gravity, right? That the establishment worships. They even have that started with a dream about,
Right.
I don't know,
Uh,
like
They like,
the apple hit him and then he dreamt it up, right? Like
yeah,
he imagined it, like he imagined how things work, right? So that was the beginning of all of that.
that's what Tesla, although he's not an establishment darling, that's what Tesla said. That's how he got all his ideas, right? He would
Oh,
actually
we
go into a
go on.
quiet room and sit for 48 hours and he wouldn't think at all, but he would imagine some new, electrical equipment, whatever he was designing, and he would, rather than take the physical, cogs and wheels and gears and wires and do it all in the physical, he said he would do it all in his imagination, so that when he figured it out in his imagination, he could just build it correctly straight away and it would work.
Oh, sure. I mean, I work like that as well. I mean, like as soon as I'll be programming something and then I'll get to a point and I'll be like, whoa, oh my God, what's that problem? How do I do that? It's not like I sit there and do the problem away. I just get
Right.
up and walk away and just
Right.
imagine it. And then I go back and be like, da, 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 and just do it. Like I do it in my mind first. I'm pretty
Truth
sure
is,
most people can relate to that.
yeah, well, the truth is we're using our imagination constantly. Right? There's
Right.
never when we're awake, right? We're constantly using it. If nothing more than to imagine another boring day in the life, just like yesterday and the day before. We actually conjure that up with our imagination, our routine. If you weren't using that imagination, you could never have a day like any other. Interestingly enough. And then lastly, I just put on down here because I've talked about it several times, near-death experiences, NDEs. And while most of us haven't had those, fortunately, probably, uh, just another example of this non-physical, non-material event that can happen to people that's, life-changing, mind-boggling, what these people are saying. But the point of all that list was these are all metaphysical things that we are completely, wholly dependent upon, minus the NDEs. Right? Thoughts, feelings, breath, imagination, and dreams.
Hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, when we started working on this, I had no idea where you were going, but after I saw you lay the whole thing out, I thought it was really interesting after I got it because I realized, I see what you're saying now. The establishment philosophers are just having an intellectual debate, touching those things as concepts, but never really going into anything. Like none of them are like chapter one, thoughts, chapter two, emotions, chapter three, dreams, right? You don't find that. It's just like how well can I shuffle all these concepts around until I'm mega confused? And
Right.
I really find that those books that they've written, especially Kant, I've always found that to be the worst one, is just a guy writing his confusion down in a book.
Yeah, pretty much. It's all so simple. Everything is simple. As soon as they say it's complex or, only smart people can figure it out, that's a lie.
Hmm.
Every single
Right.
time.
Yeah.
Every single time. There's never an exception to that. And people, every one of us, or I can go talk to a 5-year-old about thoughts, feelings, breath, imagination, and dreams and have a perfectly rational discussion with the 5-year-old. I don't need to explain any of those things, right?
Right. They can discuss things beyond physical without ever reading uh Introduction to Western Introduction to Philosophy. What's it called? A history of what's that Bertrand Russell's tome book that he
Well,
wrote that I
I have no
read?
idea.
It's just so big. It's like a history of Western philosophy. Yeah, that's what it is. It's a massive book that I sat there and read, and afterwards was just like, what are these? What are they talking about?
Right. Right. Just
There's no
law.
chapter one thoughts. There's nothing like that.
Right. So metaphysics is this. This is it.
Right.
Everybody knows it. And everybody, if you stop and think about it, I mean, I tried to point it out earlier. If you stop and give it some consideration, you'll see that these are the most important things to you.
Hmm. So the
But we
metaphysical things are the most important things.
absolutely no, what you couldn't have life without them, without any of them. You get
So
rid of one of them, and you're a vegetable at best. Maybe you're on a cart in a coma with your heart pumping, but you don't have any real life.
So let's have a little contest here. Let's put
Hmm.
forward two definitions of metaphysics, right? So definition one from Brad, things which are beyond physical, such as thoughts, feelings, breath, imagination, dreams, NDEs. Okay, there's one. Definition two, the branch of philosophy that deals with first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, identity, time, and space. Well, which one's a real objective definition?
Right. Well, obviously, one passes the establishment sniff test for some reason. Their definition is really let's think right and talk about what we're thinking about. That's what their metaphysics is.
Yeah.
And the real metaphysicians, what I consider metaphysicians, and there's hundreds of them. They go by different titles or names in different cultures. right? We talked about mystics in the previous podcast. A mystic is a metaphysician like Neville Goddard. I speak of Rudolf Steiner all the time as the ultimate metaphysician. I mean, there's no one even in the same ballpark as him in terms of, prolific production of information. But he's not considered, you won't casually find him listed as a metaphysician, right? He's an anthropologist or whatever his, his philosophy was that he named, or a theosophist. Helena Blavatsky, I don't know if she particularly was a metaphysician, but certainly the people that gave her the information for her book were, and these were Tibetan monks, right? Rinpoche, Zen master, a Swami, a yogi, a guru. These are all metaphysicians. Because that's all they're speaking of is this stuff not outside of you. They're saying your five senses are tricking you, and the outer reality is really a foregone. It's a dead result, and we'll get to that here in the summary here. But that's what they're all saying, is that what's important to you is much closer, right? It's inside of you. And we think of these thoughts and feelings and imagination and so forth as being inside of us. Saying that's where you want your attention if you want to get to the heart of the matter. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the subtle bodies. I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this. I really only want to talk about three, but Matt and I went back and forth on this for a while, and I just said, there's even more than this quick list that I'm going to run through here. And this is, of course, as opposed to the gross body or the physical body, right? So the real metaphysicians have been talking about this for thousands of years. Why would modern establishment science ignore everything they have to say? They've actually got an explanation for what emotions are, right? And they say that the emotions issue from what they call the etheric or the emotional body. And they suggest that this is, and I gave Matt this analogy. Think of a Russian doll, right? The Russian dolls, right? There's a smaller one inside of a smaller one inside of a smaller one. So if you use that idea, consider your physical body to be the smallest, least significant Russian doll, and then that's encased in the etheric body, the emotional body. And so that's where your emotions come from. And that's why Abraham Hicks says the most important thing to you is how you feel, right? So they say that's the larger part of you. And they never say how much larger is the etheric body or the feelings than the physical body, but consider it a casing around your physical body. And that's where these emotions come from. They don't come from your glands and chemical reactions. The chemical reactions are a result of what the issues from this etheric body, which is, of course, metaphysical, right? With me?
I'm with you.
And so then the next one outside of that body is the astral or mental. And this is what people talk about. And by the way, the etheric they talk about is like fifth dimensional. The astral is fourth dimensional. So the physical body is in third dimension, 3D. So the astral or mental is outside of that etheric. And this is the realm of Lucifer, if you like. This region that is held up by the so-called being known as Lucifer. And this is where your thoughts are. This is where they come and go from. And your astral and etheric bodies are mixing with those around you, right? When you come in close contact with people that are nearby, friends and family, coworkers, etc. So we pick up on each other's thoughts and feelings, right? The more intuitive.
Just let me clarify.
Go ahead.
So you got physical, 3D, and then you're saying you got mental, 4D, administered by Lucifer, supposedly, and then you got
Holding the
emotional
space.
or etheric, 5D.
Yes. And then
Lucifer is holding space.
Holding the astral space. And the
Holding
Indians,
the astral space. Okay.
Right, the Indian yogis, gurus, swamis would call this the Akash. And kind of the new age term for this is Akashic record. And there are people that's saying all the thoughts and deeds and actions that have ever happened are all in this library, if you will. And certain people have developed skills and techniques where they can go and find information in this Akashic record where everything's recorded. So that's where that idea comes from. It's all in this astral realm. All the thoughts that have ever been thought are in it. So they can be retrieved. Yeah. Again, I'm not I'm not describing this so people believe it or don't believe it. Saying this is what people have been saying for thousands of years. And you won't find a word of it in establishment scientism. So they have to ignore it and pretend that thoughts are a mystery, right?
Soon to be explained by physical cause, right?
Yeah.
Soon.
There's, there's a
Science is a
chemical reaction.
ongoing process.
Yeah, they'll write a paper that'll get peer reviewed, approved, and they'll stamp it, a nice abstract summary on the front of it. We figured out what thoughts are. They're made up of the chemical, this, that, and the other. I mean, and 99% of the people in that world will say, "Yep, there it is. They figured it out," without a lick of proof. But yeah, so those are the subtle bodies, and then there's the etheric template, celestial, causal, and which I'm not going to talk about. That we go too far off track. And then finally, though, we talk about the kind of the light body, and I think that's the light body is what in case that's the top Russian doll, the biggest Russian doll, and the word that the one word we have at least in English is the Merkaba or the Merkaba, right? When you flash, I forget which biblical character flashes into the Merkaba, right? Disappears right in front of everybody. Goes at that's them basically instantaneously dropping the physical body, etheric, astral, celestial, causal, and going straight to the light body.
Were you being sarcastic when you said you forget, or are you talking about Jesus?
It wasn't Jesus. No, it was it was
Or someone
Elijah.
else?
It was Elijah or Ezekiel. I can't remember who it was. It's an E name. I always forget. So that's why. Yeah, no. The Jesus story is something different. No, this is in the Old Testament. Anyway,
And
that's
when
where the
Jesus rose from the dead, is it supposed that he appeared in one of these other bodies?
well, according to the mainstream idea, no, but according to the esoteric New Age, yeah, he was in his light body, he was
Light
appearing.
body.
Yeah, that's right. We could project the image of a form that people recognized. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the whole point of this of talking about the bodies was that there is an explanation for our thoughts and feelings, and the suggestion is that they are metaphysical bodies that surround our physical body, and that's where our personal thoughts and personal feelings are located. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, it sounds more likely to me because I have zero faith in this uh, idea that the emotions and mental are physically caused. That to me seems the most absurd thing possible.
Well, yeah, and there's no evidence for that, right? So all they can do is look at, reactions. Well, when someone gets mad, then their cortisone levels go up, and we can test their blood. And when someone's scared, their adrenaline rises, and
Oh
therefore
yeah,
it's
it's
adrenaline.
garbage.
Well, yeah, but the question is why, right? Why did the person's adrenaline go up? Because they were scared, right? So, but you
Yeah,
say, where did that feeling of fear come from, right? It didn't come from the adrenaline, right? It came from
right.
somewhere else, right? They had a thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then they had a feeling, right? You get after the thought comes the feeling. So you go astral, etheric, and then the final result is, all right, we're going to stimulate the body with adrenaline so he can outrun the bear or lift the car off the child or whatever. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and they've also got another physical explanation of emotions. They have like mirror neurons, right? It's like the special neurons that respond to seeing other people experiencing emotions, right? Like they've got this physical explanation of the emotion transferring from one person to another, as opposed to just a shared emotional connection.
Right. Right. And but we don't need their explanation. We can say, I can feel happy and come around people and make them feel happy. I don't have to touch them or hug them or anything else, right? So obviously that emotion of happiness or sadness transferred in some other non-physical
Right.
way,
Right.
right?
Yeah. You could transfer that happiness just by getting on the phone, right? Without the visual mirror neuron. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. You tell someone some bad news, watch them go from happy to sad in half a second. Right. So obviously that's nonsense. So anyway, let's see if we can get this nicely summarized, because metaphysics is the whole shooting match. And this is what all the spiritual gurus are talking about. Doesn't like I call them all metaphysicians. Steiner, Goddard, Blavatsky, Prentice Mulford, I think is the best one to start with. If you've never approached any of this spirituality or metaphysics, anything, I think he's the best, because his first book he wrote, oddly enough, was Thoughts Are Things, right?
Great
So
title.
that's the title. And he's saying it's not, this thought isn't this private thing that only you have, and it turns into something real. And so if you listen to, the other metaphysicians or the channels, they're saying this is how reality is generated, right? They're saying first you have the thought about something, and then that formulates into beliefs, and then you have feelings that then join those thoughts. So if you think I'm poor, I'm lousy, I'm unworthy, I'm never going to get anywhere, then what kind of feeling does that generate, right? It generates a feeling of lethargy and sadness and depression, right? Or you think I'm fantastic and I'm rich and I'm handsome and I'm perfect, that generates a feeling of elation and happiness, right? And so you can see how this works. And they're saying that what they call when all that combines into what they call your vibration, right? Which is really your feeling state, your state of being is the whole shooting match. Has nothing to do, they're saying that it has nothing to do with your education, your level of intelligence, your IQ, your networking abilities. It's what it comes down to, what you think, what you then believe, then how you feel. And that produces the reality you experience. What do you think?
Well, just let me resolve one thing here. Like
Mhm.
you said that the emotional is up at 50, and that encases the mental, which is a 4D, right? But then you said it's what you think, then what you believe, then what you feel, and that sounds like it's a contradiction.
Now, don't get lost in 4D and 5D and 3D stuff. That's not important, right?
Okay.
The first thing you do is you have a thought about something. I'm
Mhm.
poor. I'm rich, right?
Mhm.
You agree? Yeah. And then
Oh,
when
seems
after you have
plausible.
that, so you have that thought, and you say, I think I'm poor, and you go, yeah. I look at my bank account, and I only have $100, and I have a junky car, and I have a crappy house, and I have junky furniture, and so right, thought after thought after thought. We're building, right? We're building on the original thought. I'm poor. So the thoughts and those thoughts add up to a belief. I'm definitely poor, and most people aren't happy to be poor, so they feel bad about it, right?
Mhm.
So that produces a bad feeling. And that bad feeling around wealth then continuously generates the reality of being poor. So it's self fulfilling. I believe I'm poor, therefore I see nothing but things that come back to my experience that tell me I'm poor.
So you're suggesting believing is seeing.
That is what the metaphysicians all say, not the other way around.
And so do you suppose that believing is seeing? Like if that's the way it is, then do you suppose that the inversion to seeing is believing is the kind of almost closest to the core brainwashing of this realm?
That's right. Right. That's the materialist brainwashing.
That's the
Backwards.
materialist. That's the
Yeah.
thing, right?
It's an inversion, right? Always inverted. Has to be. And to invert unity, to go from unity to duality, you have to invert things. And this is the result. But that's getting off into, a higher conversation, if you will. But for right now, right, we're sticking with this idea. And I mean, like I said, go listen to Abraham Hicks or Bashar, or some of these other channels, and test it out for yourself, right? The tricky thing is, of course, everybody who hears this says, okay, I'm going to start thinking I'm a millionaire, but they're not doing it right, right? Or at the end of a day or a week, they go, "Yep, I knew it. I knew this wasn't going to work." So the whole time, their belief was this isn't going to work. Yeah.
Hmm.
And just exactly what they believed happened. Money's the easiest thing to talk about, right? But it's always what your belief is. If you believed it was going to work, like you really believed it, and you started believing you were a millionaire, then it doesn't happen instantaneously, right? We have what's known as this grace period because we're us humans are apt to think about things we don't want and worry and fear and doubt and grief and guilt and right. And we don't really want to create those things. So we're given a little grace period where we won't materialize those unless we hang on to them for a really long time. So there is some delay. You can't right now say, all right, I want a Ferrari in my driveway right this second. Didn't work. Right? It takes a little more work than that. And this is law of attraction, manifestation stuff. We're not talking about that here tonight, but this is metaphysics. So very simply, they're saying what we've been trained in materialism is to try to fix what's outside of us, right? If we could only get rid of Biden and get Trump back in there, everything will be wonderful, right? If only I could get, if only I could get my boss fired and get a new boss, then everything would be better at work, right? If only my neighbors would move out and so that I could get good neighbors that move in that I liked, then my life would get better, right? If only I could work out harder and lose this weight and get bigger muscles, then everything would be better. Right? Again and again and again, everybody's been brainwashed to look for a fix in the material reality to improve their lives.
It's funny that people keep believing that.
Why is
Like
it funny?
with the amount of experience that people have had with, getting the things that they think will fix their problems and then being able to look and go, wait, I still have the problem. You'd think that we'd ditch that by now.
Well, sometimes it
I don't
works, right?
need.
If you believe it's going to work, then it does work, right? And that's why you have 1,000 different diets and 50,000 different vitamins and supplements and cures and ointments and treatments that work for people, right? So some do see the result, the effective result. Why? The question is why though? Why doesn't, treatment X work for 100% of the people? Where's the explanation for that?
I find there's just like there's always a few people that kind of get some result from some health change, and then there's a huge group of people who don't.
Usually that's
But those,
right. Yeah.
but the people who get the change are the ones that are just adamant about it,
Yeah.
like definitely 100%,
You can
and
feel
they
their
never stop believing it.
right. You can feel their truth coming through when because it did work for them. They think, right? That's what
Hmm.
they believe, right? I took this, this serum for 4 months and got rid of my psoriasis, right? And it did. That did happen for them because they believed that, tonic was going to do the job. Right. So they're absolutely. And I got on this diet and I just knew that a diet of 8 baked potatoes a day was going to make me lose 300 pounds. Right. And it worked. Right.
Well,
What would I?
and I
Hmm.
suppose the belief, like a heavy enough level of belief to allow their dis-ease and fear to actually subside, right?
I mean, it's the placebo effect. Right. That's
Mm,
what modern medicine would like to call it. Right.
mm.
There's actually a good little documentary out there about that had some really interesting results. And there was one woman in particular that was like adamant that took the real medication for the problem that she was I forget what disease it was, but she was in the placebo group taking the sugar pill. And she like fought the people who ran the study at the hospital for like 6 months, telling them, you got it backwards. I was on the medication. No, no, you were taking the sugar pill. Because she had tried, for 20 years or whatever to get rid of her stuff. Anyway, so yeah, that's the whole point of this. That's what we're going to get to. When I talk about metaphysics, right, we're talking about the things that are most important to you and effectively shape your life, your thoughts, your feelings, your breath, your imagination, and your dreams. Those are the only metaphysical things that matter. You don't need to know about the astral body, the etheric body, and the causal body, or all the other subdivisions of those. None of that matters, right? No need to study any of that. Every one of us knows from age 5 to 105 what feelings and thoughts, imagination and dreams are. And The real metaphysicians in this world, not the establishment, but the real metaphysicians all suggest that these are the tools or the foundation and the tools that shape your reality. Yeah?
And if we go back to, it does say when you even when you look up Google, it says metaphysics deals with the first principles of things.
There they are.
So maybe even that part's okay.
Yeah, part of all those definitions was, reasonable. That's it. That is the foundation of your existence are those metaphysical things. And
Mhm.
contrary to our education, brainwashing education, right? We want to improve our lives. We have to first become aware of these things that are most foundational important to us. And just having the awareness starts to shift things for people. Oh my gosh, I'm always thinking what terrible things are going to happen to me, right? And I'm always feeling crappy at night because da 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 da. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm imagining this scenario playing out, and I don't want it. You know what I mean? Like the
Oh
people
yeah.
see that for the first time when you point it out to them. Oh my gosh, yeah, I shouldn't be thinking and feeling and imagining this kind of stuff, should I? You're like, no, unless you want it.
All right
And
then.
that's a massive Take Your Power Back podcast here. Hopefully everybody
Oh, that's right on
could
right on
resonate
tack
with
with it,
this.
isn't it?
This is how you
Like
start.
you could say, see, if you outsource your metaphysics to the establishment, then you just go into thought confusion land. That's disempowerment. Like
Right.
if you've replaced your metaphysics, your actual things that are beyond physical, with an intellectual debate and a discussion between Nietzsche and Kant and Hegel and Ayn Rand, then you're out of touch with your power.
Right. You become a victim immediately of viruses and spooky diseases and toxins and bears and racists and misogynists and Republicans and Democrats, right? These are
Right.
the source. Everybody has got these things chalked up as the source of their problems.
Mhm.
And it's not true. But when you believe it's true, you then generate a reality where it appears to be true. But why would you want to go around imagining, dreaming, thinking, and feeling about all terrible things out there? Don't you have better things to do? Like thinking, feeling, imagining, and dreaming about things you do want? Wouldn't that be make for a more productive life?
Certainly my choice.
Rhetorical question. That's a huge step
Rhetorical
towards
answer.
taking your power back. Anyway, great podcast. I think we got it in just at an hour here. So perfect.
Beautiful. We did it. We've been struggling.
Finally. Awesome. All right, Matt. Thanks for your grabbing some of those establishment definitions and doing the hard work of slogging through reading some of those very confusing
They're tongue
definitions,
twisters.
philosophies. Yeah, you did a good job. Anyway, I hope everybody gets a little something out of this, and hopefully, as I talk about the word in the future, people won't be so mystified by the word, and they'll go, "Oh, Brad's talking about our thoughts, feelings, imagination, and dreams."
Mhm.
That's
All
metaphysics.
right. Well, thanks, Brad, for the wisdom,
Thank
and thanks for everyone listening. Appreciate your interest.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt. We'll catch you on the next podcast next week. Bye bye.
See you around. Bye.